Today, we're diving into some absolutely explosive developments. Germany's chancellor is suddenly cancelling everything to handle a Ukraine crisis, while his own people are furious he's ignoring them. Britain is about to hand China its biggest European embassy despite serious security red flags. The BBC is hemorrhaging money as millions of households simply refuse to pay anymore. France's top general just told everyone to prepare for war in 3 years, and the entire country is now in revolt against him. And Nicolas Sarkozy, after spending just 3 weeks in prison, is publishing a book about it. Plus, there are some truly bizarre crime waves happening in Germany that you won't believe. But here's the thing, I've saved the most fascinating part for the very end of this episode, so stick with me. Before we get into all of this, let me remind you who I am and why I do this. I spent years working inside one of those big establishment media operations, the kind everyone recognizes, the kind everyone trusts, and I watched, day after day, as stories were massaged, facts were cherry-picked, narratives were carefully constructed to serve certain interests. I couldn't do it anymore, so I walked away. Now I'm out here, independent, unfiltered, and I bring you what actually matters, not what some editorial board decides you should think. That's my promise to you. And speaking of promises, I need to ask something from you. If you find value in what we do here, if you appreciate that we're out here doing the hard work, digging through sources, fact-checking everything to avoid feeding you fake news, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you're able, consider sponsoring us. It's not easy doing this work, especially when you're going against the grain of the mainstream narrative. Your support keeps us independent and keeps us honest. And remember, stay until the end because that's where the most interesting revelation is waiting for you. So let's jump right in. Friedrich Merz, Germany's chancellor, just abruptly cancelled a series of scheduled meetings. Why? To conduct what they're calling internal consultations and hold phone conversations about the situation in Ukraine. He even asked Thorsten Frey, the head of the Federal Chancellery, to stand in for him at one event. German media is reporting that Merz will be holding talks with, among others, President Donald Trump and the President of Ukraine. And here's the interesting part. They've said that details of these phone conversations will only be released with the agreement of the other parties involved. Very secretive, very hush-hush. Now, the speculation, and it's pretty well-founded speculation, is that these discussions revolve around Donald Trump's 28-point peace plan for Ukraine, so we're watching closely to see what comes next. The intrigue is definitely building, but here's what you need to understand, and this is critical. Germans are absolutely furious that their chancellor isn't actually focused on Germany. They're watching him spend all his time and energy on foreign policy, while their own country faces serious domestic challenges. And that frustration isn't just simmering, it's boiling over. Let me give you some context here. After Merz visited Brazil, you probably heard about this, he came back and made some rather negative comments about the country. Brazilians were offended, some say insulted. So German journalists, always looking for a story, decided to ask Brazilians living in Germany, people who work there, who've built lives there, what they thought about their chancellor. And the responses? Absolutely devastating. One Brazilian man working as a waiter in Berlin called it complete disgrace and an insult, but he didn't stop there. He had advice for the chancellor. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if Merz can't handle foreign policy, he should put more effort into domestic policy, because he's making completely wrong decisions there too. That's a waiter, someone working every day to make ends meet, giving a performance review to the leader of Germany. Think about that for a moment. What does it say when ordinary working people feel confident enough, frustrated enough to publicly criticize their leader this way? And it gets even more pointed. According to this man, Friedrich Merz, the leader of the CDU party, is developing policies only for the wealthy, not for the middle class. That's a serious accusation. Then there's another Brazilian, a woman who's been living in Germany for 26 years. She runs a hair removal salon. She told journalists that Germany has changed dramatically, and not for the better. Her words were striking. She said, "We work incredibly hard, and what does Merz do? He takes our money and gives it to others who do nothing." Those are her words, not mine. And her colleague added something equally revealing. Many of my German clients, she said, tell me they want to leave the country, and if someone does come to Germany, they should learn the language and respect the local culture. Now, I want you to think about what's happening here. These aren't politicians speaking. These aren't activists with an agenda. These are working people, immigrants who've integrated, who've built businesses, who pay taxes, and they're expressing deep frustration with how their adopted country is being managed. That should tell you something significant about the state of German politics right now. But wait, because the dissatisfaction with Germany's government doesn't end there. There's another angle to this story that's almost satirical. Claudia Roth, a politician from the Green Party, just criticized the German government for contributing 1 billion euros to something called the Tropical Forests Forever Global Fund. Now, you'd think a green politician would be happy about environmental funding, right? Wrong. She called the amount insufficient because other countries are contributing 3 times as much. 1 billion euros, according to green politicians, is nothing. It's inadequate, it's embarrassing, and I want to be clear, this isn't a joke. This is really happening. Even the Greens, the party that irritates German citizens more than perhaps any other, they're also unhappy with the government. Think about that dynamic. When even your most ideologically aligned supporters are publicly criticizing you, when the people who should be your natural allies are calling your efforts insufficient, you have a serious political problem. But here's where things get even more intriguing, and trust me, you'll want to hear this next part. Let's shift to Britain, where something unexpected is happening. Keir Starmer, against many people's expectations, is planning to approve the opening of a massive new Chinese embassy right in the heart of London. And when I say massive, I mean it. This building will cover 20,000 square meters and will become the largest embassy in all of Europe, despite, and this is the crucial part, despite a number of security concerns that were raised during the planning process. Beijing purchased this site back in 2018 for £255 million, but since then there have been serious objections. Why? Because of its proximity to cables carrying communications to London's crucial financial district. That's not a small concern. We're talking about potential access to financial infrastructure. Additionally, and this should raise eyebrows, China has refused to provide British authorities with the complete internal layout plan of the building. Beijing simply doesn't think it's necessary to share that information. Read into that what you will. So what happened? China issued what's being described as an angry warning about consequences, though the specifics of those consequences haven't been detailed publicly if the embassy doesn't receive construction approval. And just like that, Starmer agrees. He's even planning to visit China next year. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to think about this, but I am here to point out the pattern. We're seeing Western leaders making accommodations, making concessions in ways that seem at odds with their stated security priorities. Whether it's pragmatism, whether it's economic pressure, whether it's something else entirely, that's for you to decide. But the facts are the facts. Meanwhile, in another corner of the British media landscape, something significant is happening to the BBC. The corporation is reportedly losing £100 million as millions of British households are refusing to pay the license fee. And the reason being cited? A scandal over bias. To put it very mildly, people don't want information from the BBC anymore. And honestly, can you blame them? No one wants to be deceived. No one wants to be manipulated through what's supposed to be a public broadcasting service. A record number of British households have simply stopped paying the license fee. Over the past few months, the BBC has been dragged through a series of scandals, and approximately 3,600,000 households have declared they have no desire to use BBC services. Just think about that number. 3.6 million households saying no thank you. Now try to restore that reputation. It's nearly impossible. When trust is broken at that scale, when that many people actively opt out, you're not dealing with a PR problem. You're dealing with a credibility crisis that might be permanent. And if you think that's dramatic, let me tell you what's happening in France right now, because this is genuinely alarming. France continues to shock the world. Beyond the scandalous fear-mongering, there's now a direct call to prepare for war within 3 to 4 years. This call came from General Fabien Mandon, the chief of the General Staff of the French Armed Forces. And right now, all of France, without exception, every politician across the spectrum is furious with him. The response has been universal. We will not go to war. There's diplomacy. This is the 21st century. century? What are you talking about? So, beyond this blatant, and I do mean blatant, attempt to frighten French citizens, there's another story that's raising eyebrows. Nicolas Sarkozy has decided to surprise everyone by announcing he's publishing a book about his time in prison. The title? Diary of a Prisoner. The book is already available for pre-order and goes on sale December 10th. Now, here's the context. On September 25th, Sarkozy was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He spent exactly 3 weeks behind bars before being released on November 10th after a Paris appeals court granted his request for release. He had guards assigned to him, so nothing particularly dangerous could have happened to him. But here's what makes this noteworthy. This is unprecedented. Someone writing an entire book about 3 weeks in prison. 3 weeks, with security protection. It's almost absurd. We'll see what critics have to say when it's published, but the audacity of it, the sheer confidence to turn 3 weeks into a memoir that tells you something about the political culture we're living in. Now let's turn to the United States, where efforts to restore order are continuing in full force. Chicago just experienced massive raids targeting individuals without legal status. Federal agents arrested more than 3,000 people. This gives you a sense of the scale of issues left behind after years of certain policies. According to official projections, deportations by the end of the calendar year will reach at least 600,000 people. So we're watching to see how this unfolds, and we'll set that aside for now as the situation continues to develop. But here's something I mentioned yesterday that now has a fascinating follow-up. Remember that stolen 300-kilogram bronze bell from the beautiful city of Bremen? Well, it's turned up at a scrap metal collection point. An unsuspecting employee at the recycling facility purchased the bell from 2 men, completely unaware it was stolen. But once he learned about the theft, he immediately contacted the police. The bronze bell will now be returned to the church community as quickly as possible, according to police statements. And here's what strikes me about this. Not long ago, it would have been nearly impossible to imagine this kind of thing happening in Germany specifically. But now, treasure hunters, or more accurately, criminals hunting for non-ferrous metals, they're expanding into new territories. And there's yet another new report about this trend. In Berlin, a high-profile criminal case has just been opened. 3 people are now on trial. They're accused of systematically stealing bronze statues from cemeteries. A 60-year-old man and a 62-year-old woman, along with unknown accomplices, were stealing bronze statues in both Berlin and Hamburg, directly from cemeteries. They're being charged with 74 separate incidents. Can you imagine? 74 thefts. And here's how the police caught them. Not through intensive investigation or heightened patrols. Not at all. One man reported that he'd been offered a stolen bronze statue for purchase, and he showed civic responsibility by reporting it to the police. Obviously, if he hadn't informed the authorities, this criminal enterprise would have continued. It's genuinely frightening that this is all happening in Germany. Things change so quickly in our time. So those are the key information points for today, for right now. And they speak volumes about the direction things are moving. What do you think about everything that's happening? Write your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know your perspective. And before I let you go, let me just recap what we've covered today. Germany's leadership is facing a crisis of confidence from its own citizens, even as the chancellor focuses on Ukraine diplomacy. Britain is making major concessions to China despite security concerns, while the BBC faces a mass exodus of paying households. France's military leadership is creating panic by talking about war preparation, and Sarkozy is turning 3 weeks in prison into a book deal. America is conducting massive enforcement operations, and Germany is dealing with an epidemic of bronze theft from churches and cemeteries. These aren't isolated incidents, they're all symptoms of deeper institutional problems across Western democracies. If you found this valuable, if this gave you perspective you won't get from mainstream sources, please hit that like button, subscribe to stay informed, and if you can, consider sponsoring this channel. We're doing the hard work of bringing you facts without the filter, and your support makes that possible. I wish you peaceful skies, and I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, the news should always be good. It can't be any other way. All the best to you.